Guys, in this video I'm going to talk about replacing a toilet. Simple replacement. I've got a lot of emails and comments asking for some more DIY stuff. So this video is going to show a basic DIY toilet swap out. Guys, if you've got a leaking valve, if it's an old plumbing situation, old toilet, broken flange, call a plumber. Don't get involved in this stuff unless you're skilled enough to do this kind of stuff. So let's talk about replacing a toilet. An existing toilet is fairly straightforward to swap out because the supply and the waste lines are already in position. You don't have to do any plumbing. First step to do, we're going to turn off the water. Shut off the water supply to the toilet. This is typically located on the wall near the floor behind the toilet. Once off, we want to flush the toilet several times. When we do this, it's basically going to flush the tank, empty the tank out, and empty the bowl as well. And there's just going to be a little bit of water usually left in the tank as well as in the bowl. To deal with that water, I always use a small wet dry vac and just suction it right out. Some people use a sponge or another way. Vac works great. The next step is to disconnect the water lines. Unscrew the water line at the toilet as well as the wall valve and just make sure that that valve is holding. After that, we want to remove the floor bolts, the two bolts that secure the bowl to the floor. There are two bolts on either side. They're typically covered with a plastic cap. You can pop those off with a screwdriver. If you try to remove the tank and take it out in pieces, you're going to be disappointed. If it's an older toilet, you're going to find out that those bolts are probably corroded. So it's better to just take the whole thing out. If the nuts are frozen, you can use a hacksaw to cut them off. If the toilet is cocked to the floor, hopefully not, use a utility knife or putty knife and break that seam. And don't caulk in the new toilet. So look, to get the toilet off, once the bolts are off, you just basically rock the toilet a little bit back and forth and lift it up off of the flange. And we usually put it onto a drop cloth or towels, newspaper. Sometimes we even use a big contractor trash bag. We put it in the trash bag and we actually carry it out in the trash bag. After that, the next step is to remove the wax gasket that's around the flange. And we use a putty knife to clean that off. You want to inspect that flange for damage. And you also want to stick a rag in the hole to just keep that methane gas from coming out at you, as well as keeping things from dropping into the pipe as well. This is a good time to inspect and clean the area underneath the toilet and do whatever you got to do to make that clean again. Next step is to put a brand new wax ring on the flange, right down, and then we're going to put the toilet right over the new bolts or the same bolts and onto that wax ring. What I usually do is I just fit it over the bolts, put it down, make sure you have a nice tight seal between the toilet and the waste pipe. You might even sit on it or rock it back and forth. This flange on the floor is basically bolted to the floor, and you want to make sure that that is rock solid to create a leak-free toilet. You don't want the toilet to rock on the flange ever. So if that happens, you've got to secure that flange to the floor somehow. If it's loose or damaged, you got to replace it, and that's probably going to involve a plumber. All right, you want to make sure the toilet is level, and if it's not level, you can use plastic shims. If the floor is uneven, or if it's rocking for some reason, you will create a leak and the toilet will leak. So you want to make sure that toilet is fastened down tightly to the flange, the nuts are tight, and everything is secure. If it's rocking, typically take a look at the flange. The flange may be loose. You can use steel washers, like stainless steel washers, or plastic shims underneath the toilet to shim it to keep it from rocking if needed. And there are special plastic shims just for this. You can get them at the hardware store or your plumbing supply store. Once you've eliminated any wobble, make sure that you've cut your shims and make sure the bolts are tight to the floor. Brass bolts are best. Some actually have height adjustments built in so they can eliminate cutting them later, which is great. And when you tighten them, just alternate back and forth so that you tighten them, kind of like lug nuts. You tighten them because you don't want to crack the porcelain. The goal is to keep even pressure in clamping that toilet bowl down to the floor. With brand new toilets, you may have to attach the tank to the bowl, insert the tank put the tank on the bowl and insert the bolts. And same thing, tighten those bolts alternately so that you get even pressure until you have good contact and that seal is tight. Then you're going to want to connect the toilet to the supply line. You're going to connect the toilet to the supply line as well as the supply line to your valve. And if this is an old toilet swap out and you haven't done this in a while, get a brand new flexible stainless steel water supply line. Don't use the old one again. The stainless steel ones are a lot easier to install than those stiff metal tubing ones, and typically plumbers have special tools to do that. So don't even bother. Just go with the stainless steel flexible tubing and finger tighten them and then quarter turn tighten them with a wrench. Check for leaks by turning the water on really slowly, and you can tighten them even more if you need to. From that point, the tank in the toilet should be filling up. You want to flush the toilet several times to kind of get it going. Going back to those toilet bolts that are in the floor, in the flange, a lot of times they're tall and you need to cut them. If you just use a hacksaw, a little like close quarter hacksaw to do that. So you do this last because you want to make sure that everything works and the toilet's not leaking and you don't want to take the toilet off. But you can cut those with a little close quarter hacksaw. If the bolts spin or whatever, use pliers to hold it while you're cutting. The brass, typically they're brass and they cut easy. And like I said, leaving the bolts uncut until you've done all your final check and your leak checks and resetting all that toilet and everything, just make sure that you do that last, because if you do have to take it off, if you cut the bolts before you take it off, sometimes you can't get the nuts back on. So cut the bolts last if you have to. As far as materials go, you want to avoid having to go to the lumber yard or the supply store in the middle of this project. So get everything you need. You want to make sure you need toilet bowl bolts, stainless steel flexible hose, maybe get some plastic shims, and you definitely want a new wax ring, maybe two, just in case. As far as costs go, the average cost to replace a toilet is going to be somewhere around $350 and up, depending on the toilet you bought. We used an American Standard ActiClean toilet, and it's shown in this installation. It's a self-cleaning toilet and has a safe and effective cleaning solution that cleans and removes stains with two simple presses of a button. You have two options. You have a deep clean and a quick clean. Pretty cool toilet. It costs about $600 and got it at Lowe's. So you can get this at Lowe's or online at Lowe's. But again, these simple rules apply to basic toilet swap outs with no real complications. Anything major complications like replumbing or broken flanges or valve leaks, you either need to have the skills to do that or you need to call a plumber. I'm Rob Robillard. We'll see you next time. Take care.